Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 366 for the 25th of October 2015. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. 366 episodes of the Skeptic Zone, which means next time there's a leap year, you can listen to the first 366 episodes, one episode per day. Yes, I'm sure you'll be queuing up to do that one. What's coming up on this week's show? We have more reports from the recent Australian Skeptics Convention in Brisbane. Maynard running around with his microphone, interviewing all sorts of people. The big one, of course, the big one this week, is towards the end of the show, is the first part of a two-part interview with legendary psychic and paranormal and mystery investigator Joe Nickell. Now, Joe Nickell has been in the investigation game for many years. He's a real detective. He's worked with police on many cases. What a fascinating man. How lucky were we to have a chance to chat to Joe Nickell? How lucky was Maynard? First part of the interview coming up later in the show. Joe Nickell will be discussing what does it mean to debunk or not debunk the Nazca lines, those mysterious lines that you've heard about in the desert in South America. And Maynard and Joe have a very interesting discussion about JFK, conspiracies. The assassination of President Kennedy all those years ago, over 50 years ago now, still produces endless conspiracy theories, and Joe Nickell knows quite a lot about that. What a fascinating interview it is this week. Maynard speaking with Joe Nickell. That'll be a bit later in the show. Also on this week's show, a report from Jo Alabaster about the recent Mind Body Wallet Adventure Festival excursion. I can't think of enough words to describe what Mind Body Wallet's like when you visit it. As a skeptic, it's quite something. Joe will be telling us about that. We were very lucky this year. We went with RiAus, the president of Australian Skeptics and a reporter on the Skeptic Zone. Joe, of course, was there. Dr. Brad McKay from Embarrassing Bodies Down Under joined us, as well as Kate Brown from Choice Magazine. And the checkout. You might know her as the guilty mum if you watch the checkout here in Australia. What an eye-opening experience it was for them to see Mind Body Wallet firsthand. And one of the things that really struck me this time, although I've seen it many times before, was the entrenched conspiracy-minded, or the conspiracy theories that are in the minds of the people who are flogging various things at Mind Body Wallet, Mind Body Spirit. Their whole worldview revolves around the fact to them, that there is a giant conspiracy against the New Age modalities they're flogging, mostly medical. So if we question that this doesn't work or that can't work or this violates the laws of physics, what they'll normally do, these people, is say, well, you would say that you're part of the conspiracy, or if we ask them, why isn't this used in hospital? Oh, well, science doesn't want to know this happens, or doctors are only there to sell you drugs to keep you sick. This is their thinking. It really is. This isn't something that they've carefully crafted in order to sell their products. Well, sort of. But it's more, to them, a reality. They really do think like this. It's fascinating. It really is fascinating. It doesn't excuse the outlandish quackery on offer at Mind Body Wallet every year, and you'll see this in psychic and New Age fairs around the world. Things that can't possibly work, but I guess it boils down to consumer affairs. Anyway, we look forward to Jo Alabaster's little report about Mind Body Wallet coming up somewhere in the middle of this week's show. Now, before we get stuck into this week's show, let me tell you about a new little venture I've set up in order to help fund the Skeptic Zone and skeptical things. Mr. Cat's handmade origami jewellery. Thank you to all those people in Brisbane at the convention who stopped by the Skeptic Zone table and bought some Pegasus pendants that I'd made, or flying bird pendants, some earrings there that I'm known for making. It all helps to support the Skeptic Zone. And with Christmas coming up, folks. Anyway, if you go to www.skeptic.com, skepticzone.tv. Scroll down a little, you'll see the link to Mr. Cat, that's me, well, it's Fred, he's around here somewhere, handmade origami jewellery. Have a look. Well, that's enough from me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs. Make sure that Fred has lots of fresh cat food. Keep him happy, why not? Cat food. It's he likes the gravy kind, lots of gravy, meaty chunks in gravy, especially beef. Although in his advancing years, he's getting a bit picky. I'll try that on him. While he's enjoying that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
The excitement is building here as we drive through the streets of Brisbane. Hello, hello! And no one knows who we are, but I'm here with Mr. Saunders. How are you?
I'm well, Maynard. We had a wonderful flight. Thank you, Tiger.
Oh, look, yeah, we were right up the front. In fact, we were almost flying the plane. There's a photo of us online, and I look like Gonzo, and you look like Leslie Nielsen.
That was the idea.
Yeah, it looks like just that scene, and you've got a shot of the entire plane with us at the front. It looks like that scene in Flying High where they go, brace for crash positions. Everyone goes nuts. It's just like a still from that. And we've got Ross's dad here. How you going, sir?
Oh, I'm very good, Maynard. How are you?
Oh, pretty good now. He's driving around in the RAV4 here, but normally he gets around in an 18-wheeler petrol tanker, don't you, man?
I do, yes. I'm very excited it is too, Maynard.
Yeah. Now, you said you don't come into the city often, which you wouldn't really want to in a petrol tanker, but is it easy to get around Brisbane as far as traffic goes, or is it poorly designed?
In my opinion, it's poorly designed.
Oh! It's poorly.
Yes. Excuse my northern accent, but that's the way it is.
Oh, right. Now, where are you from, for the Liverpool Skeptics, by the way?
Well, from Derby, and right near where Alice was born.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Now, Richard, where are we staying in?
We're staying in a
hovel
Airbnb, but I was just thinking, Maynard, the good thing about sitting right at the front of the aircraft is when we land, we're the first to get off.
Yes, we got off, and it was like the Beatles. We were going to wave, take a selfie, but I reckon taking a selfie with the photo of everyone behind you hating your guts because you're holding them up getting off the plane wouldn't have been a good look.
Because there were stairs.
But we did give a wave, but then we didn't know where to go. It was like, it's like we were getting off the plane and we could hear the Man About the House music playing. It was very 70s. It was great. And then we got inside the terminal, and now we're in Brisbane. This is exciting. People are rushing, hushing, and flushing all over the fact that they've got the National Skeptics Conference happening this weekend. I've already chilled the ice for the glass of scotch that I'm going to have with Joe Nickell. What are you looking forward to, the highlight of the weekend?
There's no one highlight, Maynard. It's all going to be good. At the moment, we're on our way to Skeptic Camp, which is kicking off the National Convention. I'm going to be looking forward to meeting Eugenie Scott and all my friends that I only see normally at conventions or every now and then. But
if you only see them once a year, they're not your friends, Richard.
That's true. But it promises to be a great weekend.
And what are you going to be doing at Skeptic Camp? You're giving a talk?
Yeah, I'm giving a talk in a few hours about just over now, about the $1 Million Challenge.
Oh, okay. Right. And I'll just be giving a talk about my failed career to anyone who's happy to listen.
Looking forward to that.
I'll be the one down into the bar sobbing. Well, okay, you know where we're going, sir, do you?
Only just, I think, Maynard. We'll see how the GPS performs. Not very good in the city sometimes.
I'm outside now with someone you might know as the godlesstheist.com blogger. What's your name, sir?
James Fodor.
And where do you go to study?
The University of Melbourne.
What are you studying there?
Maths and physics, sort of, mostly.
And what were you doing at Skeptic Camp today? As I admitted in front of everyone then, I was probably the only person in the room who didn't quite understand what you were talking, because my philosophy stops at Nietzsche, because that was a bit of a downer. I believe that life intrinsically means nothing. But what was what you were saying? What was that meaning just in a nutshell?
Well, I was talking about the philosophy of science and basically some of the insights that philosophers have given about the scientific method and how it's maybe a little bit more complicated than we might have thought.
Now, I imagine philosophers and scientists don't always get on. In fact, we had one in the corner of the room going, what's the importance of this? As long as you get the answer, right? Don't bung on about the thinking. Don't overthink it, I think he was saying.
Yeah, that is a fairly common attitude, and you hear people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and others making sort of negative claims about philosophy. I generally don't really agree with that. I think that it does help us to think. I mean, philosophy is fundamentally thinking just carefully and logically about things and trying to make sense of it the best we can. And I think that that's what we should be aiming to do as skeptical thinkers. So I think it's absolutely important.
Does this intersect with ethics at all or not?
Ethics. Well, I think it can intersect maybe with sort of research or publication ethics, in the sense that I think it's very important that when we're making claims or, trying to educate people or say things, that we're careful about what we can claim on the basis of the evidence. And some of this philosophy stuff I think actually is relevant to, thinking about what we can and cannot say on the basis of evidence. There's maybe a misconception that philosophers are sort of anti-science in some sense, but there is a very large number of philosophers who are very down with science and really want to provide a sort of rigorous underpinning of how we can make sense of it sort of philosophically and what scientists are doing and the epistemological framework behind that. So, people like Sheldrake do exist, but I think a lot of mainstream philosophers don't take that very seriously. And
what is the best way for philosophers and scientists to get on? What's the common ground where they can both agree and move on from there?
Well, the word philosophy comes from philosophia, the love of wisdom, and I think scientists would agree with that wholeheartedly, that we're sort of all trying to seek wisdom, understanding of things, and science and philosophy approach somewhat different questions using somewhat different methods, but I don't see them as incompatible, and ideally I think that if we're interested in truth-seeking and trying to have the most accurate beliefs as possible, that we'll find a way to incorporate them and learn what we can from the different disciplines and their respective rich intellectual traditions.
And shout out to your favourite philosopher. Have you got one that you've studied? Wow, I like that.
Hume is just a really good start when it comes to thinking about things from a sort of a skeptical, skeptical, rational sort of mindset. Hume was an empiricist and an early sort of, quasi-atheist. He couldn't exactly call himself an atheist back then, but yeah, so probably he'd be one of my favourite philosophers.
And that talk you gave today, will we find that on the godlessatheist.com website, your blog?
I'm not sure if I've actually posted it there, but yes, I'll post up my slides or a summary or something similar shortly. And there's similar things that I've talked about there as well in the past.
Yes, I was wondering, what else do you do atheist issues very often, or is it? But how do you round off what you write up there?
Well, partly what I write about depends on, if I've had a conversation with someone or seen something that's of interest. I do write quite a bit about religion and philosophy of religion, which hence the name of the blog, and other philosophical or scientific interests as well. Sometimes I write about history. So it's a bit of a mishmash of things that interest me, or I think I have something slightly interesting to say.
And if you want to have a look at that, that's the godlessatheist.com.
The godlessatheist.com.
Oh, God. That's right, because I was looking at godless theist. That's a dichotomy, I thought to myself. Then I thought, what does dichotomy mean? Yeah.
Well, it's a deliberate oxymoron, so that's deliberate.
Okay, now once again, it's
the godlessatheist, .com.
And here we are at Brisbane Skeptic Camp. The people are in there looking and talking, and the arguing will be going on later. But who have we got here?
I'm Angie Mattke. I'm an emergency physician from the United States.
And what are you doing here as part of this whole weekend?
Well, I was one of the speakers. I had a wonderful interaction with the group, and they enjoyed my alternative medicine discussion, and I'm just having a good time seeing all these folks that are so smart and so engaging.
Well, so I imagine as part of your regular medical kit as an emergency responder, you'd have some rescue remedy in there, wouldn't you?
I don't know how much.
Some bark flower remedies? No?
I don't know what that means.
Okay, wow. None of that stuff.
An AED around?
Wow.
Homeopathy, no. That's really only good enough to cure dehydration. So.
Oh, right. Because I've seen rescue remedy being sold in chemists lately as something that students that are feeling nervous about their exam could possibly have. And so what was your angle on the alternative medicine you were here? You were saying, we carry lots of it around in the back of the ambulance and it always works. Is that what you were saying? And you had testimonials from people going, I was dying, but now that bloody bark flower remedy got me right up there.
Yeah, oddly, we never see that.
That's never hear that.
See that, yeah.
What were you talking about? What were you saying there?
I explained some of the history of chiropractic, acupuncture, and homeopathy, and explained how there's really no evidence to support use of these things to treat nearly anything. Plus, I discussed the disease process itself and how when people have a normally waxing and waning course of a disease process, if they use an intervention when they're at their worst, they will think anything works. And
because they're at their most vulnerable and they're just going to give anything a shot?
Correct. And so they do sometimes see improvement, but it's not necessarily because of the thing that they tried.
Right. I would imagine that in the case of cancer, doing chemotherapy, the results of that would be so bad that people would try anything to try and avoid that. Would that also be something that happens?
That's a lot of what I hear from patients when they try to avoid chemotherapy. unfortunately, though, chemotherapy really is one of the best things we have for cancer at this point.
And can some of the alternative medicines allay some of the symptoms, even in a placebo effect?
Well, if they actually work, they would be considered medicine, so they wouldn't actually be considered alternative medicines. Placebo effect is an effect, but there's no real evidence that has any true effect. And it's not just the thing itself that you take, it's the whole surrounding situation, the nice lighting, the very caring provider. Those things all provide a placebo effect over and above the actual pill that you take.
So how do you go when you compare your experience with real medicine to people who had a personal experience and will swear blind that this thing cured them, that no way it could have? How do you go with those arguments? Because that's tough.
I try very hard not to alienate my patients, but sometimes I have to explain that the thing that they were doing probably did not help. And in fact, I have seen people have great harm from these interventions. I've personally seen a patient paralyzed from what I suspect was the chiropractic manipulation. And
that is on top of the possible delay of proper treatment by trying these things first. Perhaps that might have happened to Steve Jobs even. Correct. Wow. So what would you say to someone whose friend is getting into a bit of alternative medicine and they should be maybe getting into the real medicine? What's the best way to have an intervention with them? Well, that's a very good question. I struggle with that myself. But, certainly the thing you want to do is to preserve your relationship with the person and make sure that you're supportive of their attempts to heal themselves. Unfortunately, many times they use techniques that are not helpful, and all you can do is educate yourself and try to help educate the person, but sometimes you just kind of have to let people make their own decisions. Now, where does the emergency room sit in the hierarchy of the surgeons? The neurosurgeons think they're God, of course, thoracic surgeons just underneath them, dermatologists apparently are towards the bottom. Where does it sit in the pecking order of doctors? Because they've all got that sort of thing going on. It's subtle. They don't like to admit it, but those neurosurgeons, I think they're pretty good because they mess with people's heads. It's funny you say that. I think that we're both respected and vilified in many ways because I'm an emergency doctor, but I work only nights, and so I'm waking them up in the middle of the night, and so I'm dealing with egos at all hours. And many times those egos are not at their best at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm calling them, but they have to sometimes be reminded that my goal is to take care of their patient. Yes. And so I'm doing They need to be here now. Well, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes I just need some advice, but many times I need their help in coordinating the patient's care. And so we really, truly are trying to do the best thing for the patient, and at least in the States, we are compelled to see all comers. We stabilize all patients regardless of their ability to pay. Other specialties, they don't have the same. I mean, they do to some extent have the same. They kind of have the luxury of time, don't they, usually? Many times that's true. We're often compelled to make decisions very rapidly with the minimum amount of information. So we do what we can to put the story together, but sometimes we don't have all the information. We do the best we can with that. And we are there on holidays. We're there on weekends. We are doing the things when people are not in their offices. And what personally inspired you to emergency medicine? Like, it's a very specified area. Sure, you'd be getting a rush all the time when someone comes through that door. Is that part of it at all or not? Well, what drew you to it? That's a really good question. You could be working with kids, although that can be very sad. You could be doing anything, really. Yeah, that. You just told me why I'm doing this. I mean, it's the not knowing what's going to walk in. I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge of managing a heart attack in one moment and a penetrating gunshot wound the next, and then an earache, and it's a lot of fun to have that variety. And I think I would be bored stiff in an office job. And one last tip for the Skeptic Zone listeners: you see a lot of accidents, a lot of tragic, naturally car accidents. But is there sort of accidents in the home that we can avoid and look out for? I believe slipping in the bathtub is one that we don't think of that can be a real killer. Well, not so much a killer, but disabling. I see that a lot, and it's funny because whenever the older folks who don't typically have very strong bones to start with feel bad in the middle of the night, the first thing they do is get up and walk to the hardest room in the house that has the most damaging surfaces, and then they fall down and they cut their head or they break their hip or something like that. So
I don't know if the answer is to pad the bathroom or not, but we certainly want to make sure that people are careful about moving around, making sure they're using their handholds, their walkers if they need them, things like that.
A rubber bath mat with suction things on the bottom.
That would be an excellent way to help prevent that from happening.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Skeptic Zone. You're going to have a great weekend.
Oh, my pleasure. I can't wait. It's so much fun already.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Faster than a speeding bullet, literally, 2 teams are trying to raise the land speed record to a staggering 1,000 miles per hour. Let's take a closer look at these incredible engineering projects. One project trying to achieve this mind-boggling feat is the Bloodhound SSC project from the UK. Their car is powered by a jet engine and a rocket engine, together providing 47,000 pounds of thrust, or around 135,000 horsepower. For every doubling of speed, aerodynamic drag is increased 4-fold, meaning at 1,000 miles per hour, the engines will be pushing the car through 11 tonnes per square metre of air pressure. The aerodynamic forces are unlike anything seen before, and has seen extensive computational fluid dynamic studies to not only make the car efficient enough to reach the target, but keep it controllable and safe to drive. Challenging Bloodhound is Australia's Roscoe McGlashan in Aussie Invader 5R. This bullet-shaped vehicle is powered by a single rocket engine, producing around 62,000 pounds of thrust, the equivalent of around 200,000 horsepower. The rocket is powered by kerosene and liquid oxygen. One notable design element of the car is a V-shaped bottom surface to deflect shockwaves from underneath the car, providing greater stability during extremely high speeds. And now, 4 fast facts about how to design a land speed record breaking car. One of the most important design aspects of the car is to have neither lift making the car take off, nor downforce pushing it down into the ground and risking breaking the suspension. One of the most important design aspects of the car is to have neither lift making the car take off, nor downforce pushing it into the ground and risk breaking the suspension. Braking from high speeds is also important. Bloodhound uses the car's own aerodynamic drag at very high speeds, then air brakes, then parachutes, and finally wheel brakes to stop the car. The wheels are extremely important. Made of solid aluminium alloy, they will spin at over 10,000 revolutions per minute. And in contrast to what you may think, it is actually important to keep the weight of these cars up to provide stability and to make sure the wheels maintain traction and do not slide. That's it for this week in science. For more information on these engineering quests, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Ben Lewis and we'll catch you next week.
Are you tired of waiting for the end of the world? Is the grey nano goo coming for you? Or are you just annoyed by those hordes of undead, or the colour of the moon, or even swarms of assorted biblical insects? Could that silly movie 2012 actually have any basis in reality? Or will the machines rule us all? For these questions, a fun weekend and more, come to the New Zealand Skeptics Society 2015 Annual Conference, Christchurch, 20th to 22nd November. Evidence shows that we even have some real scientists speaking on fantastic topics. When the echoing hoofbeats of the 4 gender-neutral equestrians of the apocalypse ring out across the world, where will you be? Christchurch, New Zealand, 20th to 22nd November. Apocalypse How? After all, we're the go-to place for natural disasters. For further details, visit conference.skeptics.nz. New Zealand Skeptics Society is a charitable organisation that exists to promote critical thinking. The devil is not real.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. Well, this weekend was that time again The Mind Body Spirit Festival, or as we like to call it, Mind Body Wallet, was in town. Held in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, Mind Body Wallet rolls around every 6 months. And each time I mention on social media that I'm planning on attending, friends, quite reasonably I might add, question why it is that anyone who is of a skeptical/evidence-based mindset will put themselves through a day of wandering through aisle upon aisle of stalls containing people deep into the woo and selling it. Chiropractors, health supplements, iridology, bizarre machines which claim to be able to diagnose anything under the sun, energy healing, crystal healing, psychics. I'm not going to pretend that it's always pleasant or easy, especially in contrast with last weekend's Australian Skeptics National Convention in Brisbane, where I was surrounded by lovely people with a similar outlook to my own. And as valuable as that is, there's also a lot of value in attending events such as Mind Body Wallet, paranormal expos and the like, in getting out of our comfort zone and immersing ourselves in the world of woo. One of the main reasons that I go is to see firsthand what's going on in the realm of alternative beliefs on health and psychology and scope out the sorts of products and services that are being sold. Admittedly, I spend a fair amount of time checking out these things online and in magazines. And while being able to look at these things from a distance offers us a chance to take our time and thoroughly examine claims being made, actually getting out there and interacting with stallholders offers us some insights we'd otherwise miss. Now, I'm not a particularly confrontational person, and perhaps I find interactions with people selling unproven and or unscientific health potions a little easier than others may. I can chat with vendors about their products, ask questions and gain information without getting too outwardly cranky and calling BS. But I don't think I could cope with it all too well without the company of other like-minded people for support and debriefing. And, honestly, to share a few jokes. I find gallows humour invaluable in situations such as these. We had a fantastic group for this Mind Body Wallet. Richard and Iran from the Skeptic Zone and Australian Skeptics Inc., plus Dr. Brad McKay for some medically informed opinions, and Kate Brown from Choice, who you might know as the guilty mum from the checkout, who is looking at things from a journalistic perspective. Now, some of the things we saw this time around, wow. $900 air ionizers, TENS machines connected to socks, alkalized water, again, fat-burning corsets, and there were pink leopard print ones. They're totally aiming for my demographic. The Orgone Energy people with their $120 chunks of resin that plug into PowerPoints, coloured light therapists, and 3 stalls with people who'd bought machines which they claimed could scan and diagnose problems throughout a person's entire body and then administer crystal healing all through a pair of headphones. Eesh. This is another good reason for us skeptics to attend Mind Body Wallet. We can keep an eye out for dodgy claims that overstep the line. Unfortunately, the authorities, the Therapeutic Goods Authority, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, and the Healthcare Complaints Commission don't attend these events as far as I'm aware, so don't get to see precisely what's being claimed and sold. And some of the products and therapies at Mind Body Wallet do present a danger to consumers, be it via false reassurance with diagnostic devices, a false sense that people are addressing health problems when they purchase unproven and ineffective treatments, or a waste of money on products which claim to address non-existent problems or simply don't work. There's one other reason to go to Mind Body Wallet and the like, but the outcome is a little more ill-defined than those for information gathering and reporting goods and services of concern to the authorities. During discussions with stallholders, the conversation can turn to our own perspectives on the importance of scientific evidence. And yes, this can be a little tricky. Occasionally it can be met with hostility or the vendor shutting down the conversation. But sometimes they'll be willing to engage. This can be a good time to employ Socratic questioning. Why do you believe this? What evidence do you need in order to accept a claim? What do you think skepticism involves? And to try and reassure believers that skeptics do have open minds and that we're not all about negativity. It can go many different ways, and talking believers around is not one of my priorities in these situations. But I live in hope that there are times that stallholders take something positive about skepticism and critical thought away from these exchanges. And I'm totally willing to accept that this is a leap of faith on my part. Until next time, this has been Jo Alabaster for the Skeptic Zone podcast. For more evidence, please visit my blog at evidenceplease.net. You can contact me by emailing jo@evidenceplease.net or find me on Twitter at Jo Alabaster.
Hello, Richard and all the listeners of Skeptic Zone. My name is Ran Levy, and I'm the producer and co-host of Curious Mind. It's a podcast about science, technology, and history at www.cmpod.net. Each episode will bring you interesting stories from a wide range of subjects, from physics to astronomy and medicine, from arts to science fiction. We strive for the highest production values both in content and in delivery. We already have on the air episodes about German U-boats in the Second World War, about the history of X-rays and the war of currents between Tesla and Edison. Come and have a listen. www.cmpod.net.
Look, I'm with someone now that I've wanted to interview for a long time, a guy that some people call a debunker, but he's much more than that. Joe Nickell, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, and thanks for clarifying that, because this idea of debunking suggests that you could just be the flip side of the true believer, and you already know everything, and you just dismiss it. Not at all for me. I'm a detective, trained, and I'm curious about what, okay, it's probably not a ghost. It's probably not Bigfoot. It's probably not whatever. But what exactly is it? And what can we learn about ourselves and others from finding out exactly what is that?
I've heard critics of old Joe Nickell. He just finds a prosaic reason why something happened, and they use that as a negative term. Is that a good? Is prosaic necessarily a negative term?
Well, They have a point that what I find may be prosaic. It may be that rather than the Flatwoods monster of West Virginia, the famous case being an extraterrestrial creature, I'm quite sure it was a barn owl. And the description of it with terrible claws, shining eyes, a heart-shaped face, a high-pitched hissing sound, and so forth. Is a barn owl for sure, and the flying saucer that it was a meteor, and so it was a comedy of errors. Now, is a barn owl prosaic? Well, that's not. I don't always use that term. I mean, just factually, I would say factually, it's a barn owl. I'm sorry if you wanted something with more pizzazz. You wanted a barn owl wearing a turtleneck shirt and glow beads or something. But no, this is exactly what the evidence shows it is. I'll give you another example. It's maybe a little bit more exotic. There was a case some years ago up in the Yukon Territory of Canada, in the southwest corner of the Yukon, near the Alaskan coast. And someone saw a Bigfoot that was bluish in color. This struck me, this is quite unusual. It was a nighttime sighting, okay. But they said it was distinctly bluish in color, had maybe a sort of grayish face. And I thought, this is ringing a bell, and I checked on this. There's a particular type of bear called a glacial bear that has this particular genetic component that has this bluish color and ashen face. That's a pretty exotic animal in a way. It's fairly limited to the Alaskan coast.
So even people that live there might not have seen it very often. Exactly,
and to call that prosaic, well, again,
that's not my job to decide whether something's. I'm happy with an exotic explanation if it's the best and most likely explanation.
So where do you sit on theories of the other, the realm, the fact that what we are living in may not be all there is? How do you go with that? Because that's what you're coming up against all the time.
Yes, I think my 40-some years career of doing this, that I've come increasingly to believe that we live in a real and a natural world. Do I totally rule out something else? No, it's hard to prove a negative. It's hard to prove there isn't another dimension. It's hard to prove there aren't leprechauns. Try it. You can't do it. You can't prove there are no leprechauns. But these simple principles guide my work. One is that the burden of proof is on the one making the claim, not on me to have to disprove it. Difficult to disprove these things. And some other principles like Occam's razor, which says if you have 2 or 3 possibilities, the one that makes the fewest assumptions is most likely to be correct and is a preferred hypothesis. So someone can say to me, well, I don't buy your glacial bear thing. And I say, well, but look, glacial bears exist. The description is limited, but it fits the glacial bear. I rest my case. Now, you can not like it, that's okay, but if you want to replace my preferred hypothesis, you need a better one. And you need one with... So when you say, oh, it's a Bigfoot instead, well, you've just made an assumption that Bigfoot is a real creature which exists, and we don't have that proof. So you can't explain an unknown by creating another unknown.
I, of course, saw you on the show Is It Real, where you were the guy that would come along and say, nah, it's not. So is that why you get the reputation as a debunker, but that is not what you want to be known for, is it?
No, absolutely. I don't like the term debunker, and I correct people who call me that. It's true that you're put into that pigeonhole by TV producers. A lot of TV producers cannot wrap their brains around the fact that someone could actually want to be a detective, actually be open and impartial and try to find the best solution. They have their notion that, well, we have these people that have had these experiences and we need a debunker on there for the other point of view. And they have stereotyped debunkers. They know what they mean by that, and no matter what I do, no matter how much they see me do actual detective work on something for 3 years, they can't help it but think, yeah, but you're really just a debunker, aren't you?
Well, people would say that the term conspiracy theorist is used to make people who have alternative theories look bad as well. That's the angle they come from.
Well, right. I mean, we need to get beyond name-calling, but we don't always have time.
Particularly on a TV show. On
TV shows, and most things are done with sound bites and yeah, so's your mother. But, I mean, there are conspiracy theories, and they're real conspiracies, of course, but there are these laughable conspiracy theories that really don't have much to support them, and it is easy to categorically, say that these are conspiracy theorists. In the same way, and I've, occasionally talking about the Shroud of Turin, I'll refer to the other side as Shroudies. Okay, that's maybe not real kind, but in a quick moment, I could call them Shroud believers, I guess. Cool. But what we need is time to discuss these things and time to present them in a way that thoughtful people can hear both sides and come up with something.
And the Shroud of Turin is one of the ones you've been involved with very famously. Of course, the Nazca planes, you've recreated 2 of the giant. Now, with the equipment you used, could they have done it? Because I saw you had some rope in that. They could have made that. The people could have made this. Because I thought they might have been ley lines to water or something like that. But you were thinking that they were ritualistic walking paths.
Ritualistic walking paths. There are some just lines, but these lines don't appear to go towards anything. Even astronomical connections don't. They some of them work and some don't seem to work. But most of my emphasis has been on these giant pictures of the birds and the spiders and the monkey and so forth. And those wouldn't be lines pointing to some straight direction. They're clearly. In fact, some of them have intricate zigzaggy lines inside the figure, and they look very much like what we would call a maze or a labyrinth. And these extra 2 lines that each figure has, there's a pair of lines, like the spider has a pair of extra lines coming off its lower right leg. The monkey has a pair going up to the base of its tail. And we've puzzled over this for a lot. Why are these extra lines there? They have nothing to do with layout or design or anything. But as I've shown, if you walk one of those lines, and they look like paths on the ground because the gravel's been cleared away, that's how the pictures show up. If you walk one of those lines and enter the figures are all drawn with a continuous line. You just keep walking and walking, and you're traversing the entire figure, and you come out the other line. So this is just really good evidence that these are ritual walking paths. I mean, people can say...
Could they have also been trying to signal something that they saw in the sky at some stage as well?
Well, then why would you need the double lines? These extraneous lines that invite you to walk into the figure and walk out of the figure. But yes, we could ask that question, but could they be signals for the gods or the spaceships? The irony is that if you were in a spaceship and coming into planet Earth, you would be able to see this plateau of Nazca, this giant 30-mile plateau. You could see that, and it would be useful to think of it as maybe a place to land. Those figures are minuscule, teensy tiny compared. By the time you get down low enough for a spaceship, low enough to see that and understand them, and there's a bewildering mixture of them, what would it mean to you? Why would you need to see a spider and a bird and what would the purpose of this be? And you'd be almost ready to land. And then, as Maria Reich said, the German mathematician who spent her life protecting the Nazca lines, she said that the ground was soft there. She said, I'm afraid the spacemen would have gotten stuck.
And also, you mentioned yesterday you were involved in the Kennedy assassination investigation. Now, when did you do that? I would have thought that would have been even bigger than the Shroud of Turin, because that is one that has so many misdirections and bits of misinformation.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't play a big role in the Kennedy assassination. I mean, that's people are all over the place with that. There are tons of stuff. I would have had devoted a good part of my life to that, and it's already pretty much people have been there and done that. My role was to attempt to help Robert Oswald, the brother of Lee Harvey Oswald, when a crackpot named Eddowes from England, a solicitor, claimed that Oswald wasn't Oswald. His claim was that Oswald went to Russia, and the Russians did something, hid him away or killed him or something, got rid of Oswald, and they sent a lookalike back who was an assassin. Now, just stop for a moment and think. Could the mother of Oswald have been fooled by any imposter? Of course not. This is fantasy of the most James Bondish silliness.
Although he was a very interesting character in that very few Marines went to Russia and left the country and then came back. He's a very unusual character.
He's that, but just stick with me. So we've got this. All I'm dealing with is this one claim of the Oswald is not Oswald. Oswald is not buried in Oswald's grave, and this guy wanted Oswald dug up, and Robert did not want that to happen and was refusing. And then Marina, the widow of Lee Harvey, said, "Well, I called his bluff," and she said he could do it, and it caused a rift in the family. But I had tried to enter into this and say, look, we can determine already whether Oswald was Oswald because, first of all, the fingerprints. Of course, Eddowes said, yeah, but they switched the fingerprints in the file, you see. So he's got a game you're playing. Right. So I said, okay, here's how you could do it. If they dig him up and use dental records, he'll say they switched the dental records. Here's what I'm going to do. And I worked with a top expert on this. The human ear is very distinctive. No two are alike. And we checked. We had excellent pictures of the Dallas assassin's ears when he was in police custody. Very good pictures. And we had Marine Corps pictures of Oswald that Edo said were authentically Oswald. Okay. And I had this expert compare them. He said, it's the same man. There's no question about that. So even if you found someone with approximately the same height as Oswald, facial resemblance, who did plastic surgery, his mother, for heaven's sakes, wouldn't have been fooled for 30 seconds. She would have said, oh, remember, whatever. And he would have had a different voice. He would have had a different memory and so forth.
Did he end up getting exhumed? I seem to remember someone did to do with the case.
So the wife allowed it. He was exhumed. They did use dental records. They also used a mastoidectomy scar behind the ear that Oswald had. They found proof of that. So they were able forensically to, reasonably, but if anybody was interested, and nobody was, we had proved before that that Oswald was in Oswald's grave because the ears matched. And, Robert was, my impression of him, I talked to him a few times on the phone, a very nice fellow, very much of the mold that, my life was ruined by my brother assassinating the president, and I did my duty. I buried him, and by golly, that's it for me. Leave me alone. Don't keep harassing me, because I had nothing to do with it. And I felt sorry for him, and I think that he was a much put upon and very decent fellow, and that was anyway. That's pretty much. I reviewed just for my own self some of the Kennedy assassination material.
What do you mean, the Jim Mars stuff?
Well, I met Jim Mars once on a talk show, and Mars is, from the planet Mars. As far as I'm concerned, he's a flake in cowboy boots. And
now, does he grab on? Are you saying he perhaps has information that's not there, or extrapolates stuff beyond what's possible?
It's hard to say. He just seems to me a bit of an airhead. He doesn't seem to me someone who's a solid thinker. What happens with the conspiracy theorists is they poke around and they find a few discrepancies and they try to convince you there's something wrong.
Well, there are many anomalies on that day.
Yeah, most of them selected, you see, out of. But if you're a real detective, you're trying to put pieces together of a puzzle that fit and explain something. So if you want to criticize the Warren Commission and say, well, they had their super bullet theory that did all this. Well, actually, the best forensic evidence is that that's exactly what happened. It was a copper-jacketed bullet, so it didn't deform very much. And, yes, it went through two men's bodies. Nothing unusual at all about that. And I've been to the book depository and looked out the window. It's an easy shot, in my opinion. But people want to say, oh, there were extra shooters on the grassy knoll and all this.
Even easier shot from the grassy knoll, though.
Well, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. But first, I want to make a point. If you're going to criticize the super bullet, you can't postulate extra evaporating bullets that you don't have to account for. You can't just take some other pieces of the puzzle and dazzle them in front of people's eyes and confuse them. You have to, you put your pieces together, and let's see how corroborative they are, and then we'll have something. But the conspiracy theorists never have a solid, clear case that they can point to and use Occam's razor with. They just have lots more smoke and mirrors, but they want to convince you that, well, something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing about the shot. I've stood on the grassy knoll, but you're shooting any hunter. I grew up with guns. We shot. If something is moving in your field of vision from left to right, and you have to shoot, you're sweeping your gun, and you need to shoot a little ahead to accommodate for the speed. But what was happening at the book depository, you're shooting down, and all you're doing is just gently moving your rifle just slightly up as it's going away from you. It's a pretty direct and easy shot. I looked at both places. I would take the Oswald shot from the window 10 times over a grassy knoll, but keep in mind where the shell casings were. Where were they? They were in the book deposit. Were there any shell casings of the grassy? There were not.
But assassin would pick up his shell casings.
That's making rationalizations to defend a position that's not ultimately defendable. Now, furthermore, there are pictures of this. There are men in a window below Oswald's window. leaning out the window, watching the parade, the motorcade, and they heard the bang, bang, bang from upstairs, and they heard the shell casings drop on the floor. They described this. And so we need to account for 3 bullets, and we can. And they traced Oswald, whose handprint was on the boxes. His handprint was on the gun.
A partial palm print.
More than enough. More than enough. A tiny little half of a third of a fingerprint is more than enough to get ridge detail. I have fingerprint training, so I know whereof I speak. And so we know Oswald was there. We know he brought in that morning. He brought in a long object, which he said was curtain rods. No, I think we know now is a Mannlicher Carcano rifle. And we know he bought such a rifle. We know there were pictures of him with a rifle. So the conspiracy theorists are trying to confuse and make up anything, and each one has a different theory. And each book that you read, you think, yeah, boy, that's right. They've really until you read the next book, and they've got a whole different scenario and bunch of smoke and mirrors. And you think, oh yeah, but this time they really got it. No. Yeah. Actually, Oswald was Oswald, and Oswald shot those 3 shots. We don't need 6 or 8 more shots, because where did those bullets go? Did they evaporate? You have to get serious about accounting for not just another bullet went through. Where did that go, and where is the evidence of that bullet? We can account for the 3 shots Oswald fired, and they're well accounted for. And the only discrepancy, really, if the Warren report made a serious error in some of that forensic stuff, the sequencing of the bullets, one missed, and the exact order that has maybe they were in error on that, but it's a small matter. 3 shots were fired quickly.
Now, how do you feel about the House Select Committee in 1976 when they brought down a finding that there was more than one person involved, and that is the final official report on it there? What do you think of the House Select Committee report in 76? Because that kind of updated the Warren report, did it or not?
Well, they were suckered like everybody else with all the hoopla and the fanfare and so forth, and they also bought into the acoustic evidence that there was sounds, and that all was later discredited totally by the FBI laboratory. So really, you come down to, oftentimes, if you get enough investigators and you get enough personalities, some of them are more solid and good thinkers, and some are a little quicker to go off and never land. And so I think it was a compromise to say that there could have been other persons involved. It, of course, would remain always a question that Oswald might have had someone put him up to it. But now we're talking something quite different. If we agree that Oswald did the shooting, then we could reasonably say, could there have been someone else behind him? But even that doesn't show up well. Oswald was a weird and disturbed guy. If you were picking him for your assassin, you'd have to be an idiot. He for sure shot at General Walker. There's no question that sometime before that, Walker was shot at through a window, and we now know that Oswald did that. And he was out. He was a loose cannon out to shoot people that he thought were right wingers, and
I won't even get into the Jack Ruby stuff, because that just complicates it even further, doesn't it?
Right, and as I say, I have not made a career of the Kennedy assassination. You would almost have to do that to really answer all the questions. But if people wanted to find out about that, they should read Gerald Posner's book or Vincent Bugliosi's book. I recommend either of those or both of them. And I'm not saying any book is error free or not. They got every absolute crumb of evidence exactly perfectly, but they so clearly show. And documentaries like a CBS documentary and others have recreated the gunshots from that angle and shown that absolutely what the conspiracy theorists told you, that it was a difficult shot, no one could shoot that fast, no one could shoot that accurate, the bullet would do this or this. None of that is true and has been very well demonstrated. People can see that on these documentaries. They show up, from time to time. They're replayed, and they're very, very convincing. And it's not all part of some conspiracy to cover up something. Nobody would have any trouble, really, with any other scenario. Let's just round up whoever they are and put them in prison. The idea that someone shooting from the book depository could precisely at the precise moment coordinate with someone from the grassy knoll is pretty ludicrous. You and I couldn't do it. Would you wait for me to fire and then you fire quickly? Would you fire first and I fire quickly? Would we have walkie-talkies? Would nobody have any evidence of all this stuff?
Well, I guess if they were like mafia-type assassins, they'd set up a crossfire with what you'd do if you were trying to get something, wouldn't you?
No. What you would do is just what Oswald did. You'd have a sitting duck shot that you couldn't miss, and you just shoot. I mean, he got 3 shots off, and it was very effective.
One more question, and I'll leave this because I don't want to make it the JFK show. How do you make up the fact that he got to the Coke machine so quickly afterwards and looked relaxed? That's the fact I find odd.
Well, I wasn't there with a stopwatch. Were you?
Right.
So I don't know. I've certainly been impressed a time or two that something happened a lot faster than I'm sure it did. But if you want to go through this what happened afterwards, just consider that Lee Harvey Oswald, to a certainty, fled the book depository. That's pretty much a sign of guilt in any jurisdiction in any detective's playbook. And when accosted by Patrolman Tippett, who halted him because he looked like a fleeing fellow and matched a description that he had, what happened? Oswald shot him to death on the street and fled into a movie theater, and people saw this. So, again, really, what's the people's problem with every single incriminating thing that Lee Harvey Oswald did? And it's an impressive list of which I have only begun to get started listing all that he did. What is it about these people that want to excuse this and rationalize that? We have another explanation for that, and we just don't want to believe it. When the simple, an intelligent person can look at this and say, well, if it looks like an assassin, acts like an assassin, and has palm prints and flees and shoots maybe he's an assassin. It just boggles my mind that there are people who, in spite of this impressive evidence, insist on believing something to the contrary. And you have to wonder whether there's something fundamentally wrong with their thinking process, or whether they have some really anti-American government agenda.
That was part 1 of Maynard's interview with Joe Nickell. Next week, tune in for part 2, where Joe will be discussing more about conspiracy theories, the Shroud of Turin, and how to investigate mysteries. Also some UFO abductions. That'll be next week with part 2, Maynard chatting to Joe Nickell. Thanks for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you, Joe Nickell, for that wonderful interview. Part 1, more to come, with Maynard. Part 2 is next week. And thank you to Joe for your report too. And thank you to all the people who helped put together the convention in Brisbane on last weekend. Wow, it was fantastic. Everybody who went enjoyed it. The lineup was just superb. What a great lot of skeptical speakers all in the same venue. The venue itself was very nice indeed. We really enjoyed that. The gala dinner was fun. Great effort, Brisbane Skeptics. Great effort indeed. So on next week's show, more from the convention, more from Joe Nickell. and, whatever else we can scrounge together. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter @SkepticZone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation. What do you want? What is it? Do you want some more water? Come on. Yeah? Come on. There you are. Not good enough for you? Try the other tap. Come on. How about that one? Yeah, go on. If you hop up. Yeah, hop up there. Go on. Try that. Another day in the life of Fred, the skeptical cat.